Sitting in my neurologist's office for my 6-month checkup, I was confused and frustrated. My Parkinson's symptoms had gotten noticeably worse despite being compliant with my medications. My tremors were more intense, my rigidity had increased, and my fatigue was overwhelming. I expected my doctor to increase my medication doses or add new drugs. But instead, he asked me a question that seemed completely unrelated to my symptoms. He said, "Tell me about your typical breakfast. What do you usually eat first thing in the morning?" I thought it was an odd question, but I answered honestly. I told him about my morning routine of grabbing a quick breakfast on my way out the door, something convenient that I had eaten for years without a second thought. His face changed. He leaned forward and said, "I need you to stop eating that immediately. That food is one of the worst things you can consume if you have Parkinson's disease. It is literally accelerating the degeneration of your dopamine neurons." I was stunned. How could something I ate almost every day be making my Parkinson's worse? He went on to explain the science behind why this particular food is so damaging for people with Parkinson's disease, how it creates a cascade of problems in the brain, increases inflammation, disrupts the gut-brain connection, and speeds up the loss of dopamine-producing cells. He told me that in his 30 years of treating Parkinson's patients, eliminating this one food has led to more dramatic improvements in symptoms than almost any other dietary change. He said patients who stop consuming this food typically see reduced tremors within 4 to 6 weeks, better energy levels, improved medication effectiveness, and slower disease progression over time. I left that appointment determined to eliminate this food completely from my diet. It was not easy because this food is everywhere. It is marketed as healthy, it is convenient, and it is deeply ingrained in American food culture. But I committed to avoiding it entirely. Within 2 months, my symptoms had stabilized and even improved. My tremors were less frequent and less severe. My energy was better, and most surprisingly, my neurologist said my disease progression had slowed significantly compared to what he had expected. Today, I want to share with you exactly what this food is, why it is so damaging for Parkinson's disease, how it affects your brain at a cellular level, what you should eat instead, and how to identify hidden sources of this food that might be sabotaging your symptom control without you even realizing it. If your Parkinson's symptoms seem to be progressing faster than expected, if your medications are not working as well as they used to, if you feel like you are doing everything right but still getting worse, this information could be the missing piece you have been looking for. What I am about to share is backed by scientific research, confirmed by neurologists who specialize in Parkinson's disease, and validated by my own experience and the experiences of countless other patients who have seen dramatic improvements after making this one critical change. Before I reveal what this food is, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? And have you noticed that certain foods seem to make your Parkinson's symptoms worse? Maybe you have experienced increased tremors after eating certain meals or felt more fatigued after specific foods. Share your observations in the comments below, because your experience might help someone else in our community make important connections about their own symptoms. The food that my neurologist told me to eliminate immediately. The food that accelerates Parkinson's disease progression faster than almost anything else is dairy products, specifically conventional dairy from cows. This includes milk, cheese, yogurt, ice cream, butter, cream, and any food products that contain these ingredients. Now, before you think this sounds extreme or that I am promoting some fad diet, let me explain the science behind why dairy is so problematic for people with Parkinson's disease. And I want to be clear that I'm talking about conventional dairy from conventionally raised cows, not necessarily organic or grass-fed dairy, which may have different effects. First, let me share the research that initially raised red flags about dairy and Parkinson's disease. Multiple large-scale epidemiological studies have found a concerning association between dairy consumption and Parkinson's risk. A study published in the American Journal of Epidemiology followed more than 100,000 people for over 20 years and found that men who consumed more than 2 servings of dairy per day had a 60% higher risk of developing Parkinson's disease compared to men who consumed less dairy. Women showed a similar, though slightly smaller, increase in risk. Another study from the Harvard School of Public Health found that each additional daily serving of dairy was associated with a 17% increase in Parkinson's risk. These are not small studies with questionable methodology. These are large, rigorous studies from respected institutions. Now, correlation does not prove causation. Just because people who eat more dairy have higher Parkinson's rates does not necessarily mean dairy causes Parkinson's. But when we look at the mechanisms by which dairy affects the brain, the connection becomes much clearer and more concerning. Here is what happens in your body when you consume conventional dairy products. First, conventional dairy contains pesticide residues and environmental contaminants that accumulate in animal fat. Cows are exposed to pesticides through their feed and through environmental sources. These chemicals, including organophosphates and organochlorines, accumulate in the fat tissue of the cow. When you consume dairy products, especially high-fat dairy like cheese and whole milk, you are consuming concentrated amounts of these neurotoxic chemicals. Research has specifically linked pesticide exposure to increased Parkinson's risk and faster disease progression. These chemicals damage dopamine-producing neurons in an area of the brain called the substantia nigra. This is the exact same area that is affected in Parkinson's disease. So by consuming conventional dairy, you are potentially introducing toxins that directly damage the very neurons that are already dying in your brain. Second, conventional dairy contains hormones that may disrupt your body's hormonal balance. Dairy cows are often treated with bovine growth hormone to increase milk production. And even organic dairy contains naturally occurring hormones because milk is produced by pregnant cows. These hormones can affect your endocrine system and may influence neurotransmitter production and function. Some research suggests that these hormones may interfere with dopamine metabolism, though more research is needed to fully understand this mechanism. Third, and this is perhaps the most important mechanism, dairy products contain a protein called casein that can trigger inflammation and immune responses in many people. Casein is difficult for many humans to digest properly. When partially digested casein proteins cross from your gut into your bloodstream, your immune system may recognize them as foreign invaders and mount an inflammatory response. This systemic inflammation increases inflammatory markers throughout your body, including in your brain. Neuroinflammation is a key driver of Parkinson's disease progression. Anything that increases brain inflammation accelerates the death of dopamine neurons. So by consuming dairy regularly, you may be constantly triggering an inflammatory response that speeds up your disease progression. Fourth, dairy products can disrupt your gut microbiome. We now know that the gut and brain are intimately connected through the gut-brain axis, and that gut health plays a crucial role in Parkinson's disease. Some researchers even believe that Parkinson's may begin in the gut decades before motor symptoms appear. Dairy consumption has been shown to alter the composition of gut bacteria, reducing beneficial species and allowing potentially harmful bacteria to proliferate. This disrupted gut microbiome increases inflammation, produces neurotoxic compounds, and may contribute to the spread of abnormal proteins from the gut to the brain via the vagus nerve. Dairy products can interfere with the absorption of levodopa, the most common Parkinson's medication. Levodopa competes with protein for absorption in the intestines. Dairy products are high in protein, and consuming them around the time you take your medication significantly reduces how much of the drug actually gets into your bloodstream. This means your medication works less effectively, your symptoms are less well controlled, and you may need higher doses which come with more side effects. Many patients notice that their medications seem to work inconsistently. Sometimes they kick in quickly and work well. Other times they seem to barely work at all. In many cases, this inconsistency is directly related to consuming dairy or other high-protein foods too close to medication times. Let me share what happened when I eliminated dairy completely from my diet. The first week was honestly difficult. I had been eating dairy at almost every meal for my entire life. Milk in my coffee, cheese on sandwiches, yogurt for snacks, ice cream for dessert. Eliminating all of it felt overwhelming. I had cravings, and I felt deprived, but I was motivated by my neurologist's conviction that this change would make a real difference. By week 2, I noticed that my digestion had improved. I had less bloating, and my chronic constipation, which is common in Parkinson's, was getting better. By week 3, I realized that my medication seemed to be working more consistently. I was not experiencing as many off periods where the medication did not seem to work. By week 6, the change in my tremors was undeniable. They were noticeably less frequent and less intense. I could hold a coffee cup without spilling. I could write legibly. I could eat in public without embarrassment. By week 8, my energy levels had improved significantly. I was not hitting that afternoon wall of exhaustion anymore. By month 3, my neurologist examined me and noted that my motor symptoms had actually improved rather than progressed. He said this was unusual and remarkable. He asked if I had been completely compliant with avoiding dairy, and I confirmed that I had not consumed any dairy products at all. He nodded and said, "This is exactly what I see in patients who take this seriously." Over the following months, my symptom control remained stable. I was able to reduce one of my medication doses slightly, and most importantly, I felt like I had some control over my disease rather than being a helpless victim watching myself deteriorate. Now I want to address some common questions and concerns about eliminating dairy. The first question people always ask is, what about calcium? Won't I develop osteoporosis if I do not consume dairy? This is a legitimate concern, but it is based on a misconception that dairy is the only or even the best source of calcium. There are many excellent non-dairy sources of calcium, including dark leafy greens like kale and collard greens, sardines and salmon with bones, almonds and sesame seeds, fortified plant milks, and tofu made with calcium sulfate. In fact, some research suggests that countries with the highest dairy consumption actually have higher rates of osteoporosis, possibly because dairy creates an acidic environment in the body that causes calcium to be leached from bones to neutralize the acid. You can easily meet your calcium needs without any dairy products. The second question is, what about protein? Again, dairy is not the only source of protein. You can get plenty of protein from fish, poultry, eggs, legumes, nuts, seeds, and whole grains. And remember that for people with Parkinson's taking levodopa, you actually want to moderate your protein intake and time it strategically. Consuming large amounts of protein, especially around medication times, interferes with drug absorption. The third question is, what should I use instead of dairy products? There are now many excellent dairy alternatives available. For milk, you can choose from almond milk, oat milk, coconut milk, cashew milk, or soy milk. I personally prefer unsweetened almond milk because it is low in calories and does not affect blood sugar. For yogurt, there are coconut milk yogurts, almond milk yogurts, and cashew milk yogurts that provide probiotics without the problems of dairy. For cheese, there are nut-based cheeses and even some that taste remarkably similar to dairy cheese. For butter, you can use olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, or plant-based butter alternatives. For ice cream, there are now dozens of delicious options made from coconut milk, almond milk, or cashew milk. The variety and quality of dairy alternatives has exploded in recent years, making it much easier to avoid dairy without feeling deprived. The fourth question is, does this apply to all dairy, including organic or grass-fed dairy? This is a nuanced question. Organic grass-fed dairy from healthy cows contains fewer pesticide residues and no synthetic hormones, so it is certainly better than conventional dairy. However, it still contains casein, which can trigger inflammation. It still contains naturally occurring hormones. It still interferes with levodopa absorption. And some research suggests that even organic dairy is associated with increased Parkinson's risk. Though the association is not as strong, my recommendation based on my neurologist's advice and my own experience is to eliminate all dairy for at least 3 months and see how you feel. If your symptoms improve significantly, then you have your answer. If you want to experiment with reintroducing small amounts of organic grass-fed dairy after that trial period, you can do so and monitor how your body responds. But for most people, with Parkinson's, complete elimination is the best approach. Now I want to talk about hidden sources of dairy that might be sabotaging your efforts without you even realizing it. Dairy is hidden in so many processed foods that you might be consuming it regularly, even if you think you have eliminated it. Here are some common hidden sources to watch out for. Many breads and baked goods contain milk powder or whey. Always read ingredient labels carefully. Processed meats like deli slices and sausages often contain milk proteins as binders. Many protein powders and protein bars use whey or casein protein, which are derived from dairy. Salad dressings and mayonnaise often contain dairy. Some medications use lactose as a filler. Check with your pharmacist if you are unsure. Many restaurant foods are cooked with butter or contain hidden cheese or cream, even if it is not obvious from the menu description. Chocolate, unless specifically labeled as dairy-free, contains milk, and many processed snack foods contain whey, casein, or milk powder. You need to become a diligent label reader. Look for ingredients like milk, cream, butter, cheese, yogurt, whey, casein, lactose, milk solids, milk powder, and curds. If any of these appear in the ingredient list, the product contains dairy. Also be aware that some labels say non-dairy but actually contain casein. True dairy-free products will be labeled as vegan. or will specifically state that they are free from all dairy ingredients. Let me share some practical strategies for successfully eliminating dairy from your diet. First, do not try to rely on willpower alone. Set up your environment for success. Go through your refrigerator and pantry and remove all dairy products. If they are not in your house, you cannot eat them in a moment of weakness. Second, stock your kitchen with delicious dairy alternatives so you have plenty of options. Third, plan your meals in advance so you are never in a situation where the only convenient option contains dairy. Fourth, when eating out, research the restaurant ahead of time and look at the menu to identify dairy-free options. Do not be afraid to ask questions about how food is prepared and request modifications. Fifth, find a few go-to recipes that you love that are naturally dairy-free. Many cuisines like Asian, Mediterranean, and Middle Eastern have traditionally dairy-free dishes. Sixth, give your taste buds time to adjust. The first few weeks might feel challenging, but after a month, most people find that they do not miss dairy and actually prefer how they feel without it. Seventh, connect with others who eat dairy-free, whether for health reasons or as vegans. They can provide recipe ideas, restaurant recommendations, and moral support. I also want to mention some additional foods that can be problematic for Parkinson's disease, though not typically as damaging as dairy. Processed meats like bacon, sausage, and deli meats contain nitrites and other preservatives that may accelerate neurodegeneration. Fried foods and foods cooked in processed vegetable oils create inflammatory compounds that damage brain cells. Refined sugars and high fructose corn syrup promote inflammation and disrupt blood sugar, which worsens tremors and fatigue. Artificial sweeteners may negatively affect gut bacteria and brain health, and excessive alcohol interferes with medication effectiveness, disrupts sleep, and can worsen balance and coordination problems. While I am primarily focusing on dairy in this video, because that is what my neurologist identified as the most damaging for most patients, it is worth considering whether any of these other foods might also be contributing to your symptoms. Let me share a few success stories from other people I have connected with who eliminated dairy after receiving similar advice from their neurologists. I met a woman named Susan at a Parkinson's support group. She was 65 years old, and her symptoms had been progressing rapidly over the previous 2 years. Her neurologist suggested she eliminate dairy, and she was skeptical but desperate enough to try. She committed to 3 months with absolutely no dairy products. Within 6 weeks, she reported that her tremors had decreased significantly. She could eat meals in restaurants again without embarrassment. She could hold her grandchildren without fear of dropping them. After 3 months, her neurologist was so impressed with her improvement that he started recommending dairy elimination to all his Parkinson's patients. Then there is Michael, a 70-year-old retired engineer whose Parkinson's symptoms were making it impossible for him to continue his hobby of building model airplanes. His hands shook too much to do the precise work required. His neurologist suggested eliminating dairy along with some other dietary changes. Within 2 months, his tremors had stabilized enough that he could return to his hobby. He told me with tears in his eyes that being able to create things with his hands again gave him back a sense of purpose and identity. These stories remind me that while dietary changes cannot cure Parkinson's disease, they can have profound effects on symptom severity and quality of life. Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to ask you to consider joining our Beyond Parkinson community by subscribing to this channel. If you found this information about dairy and Parkinson's disease valuable, we share similar evidence-based practical strategies every single week. We cover nutrition, exercise, medication optimization, sleep improvement, emotional wellness, and the latest research, all explained in clear, actionable terms. Our community is supportive and understanding because many of us are navigating this journey together. When you subscribe, you will receive information that could genuinely improve your symptom control and quality of life. To subscribe, simply click the button below this video and then the bell icon so you are notified when we publish new content. Remember that knowledge is power and small changes can lead to significant improvements over time. Let me give you an action plan for implementing this information starting today. First, commit to completely eliminating dairy for at least 12 weeks. This is enough time to see real changes in your symptoms. Mark the date on your calendar so you have a clear endpoint for your trial period. Second, clean out your kitchen. Go through your refrigerator and pantry and remove all dairy products. Either throw them away or give them to someone who can use them. Do not keep them around thinking you will use willpower to avoid them. Third, stock up on dairy alternatives. Buy several types of plant-based milk to see which ones you prefer. Get some coconut or almond yogurt. Try different nut-based cheeses. Having good alternatives available makes the transition much easier. Fourth, plan your meals for the upcoming week. Make sure every meal and snack is dairy-free and that you have all the ingredients you need. Fifth, read labels obsessively. Start checking the ingredients on everything you buy. You will be surprised how many products contain hidden dairy. Sixth, talk to your doctor. Let your neurologist know that you are eliminating dairy from your diet. They may want to monitor your symptoms more closely to track your progress. Seventh, keep a simple symptom journal. Note your tremor intensity, energy levels, and how well your medications are working. After 12 weeks, compare your symptoms to how you felt before eliminating dairy. This objective tracking will help you see patterns and improvements that might otherwise be easy to miss. Be patient with yourself. The first couple of weeks might be challenging as you adjust to new foods and routines, but it gets much easier quickly. And remember that every dairy-free meal you eat is reducing inflammation in your brain and potentially slowing the progression of your disease. I want to emphasize that everyone's experience with Parkinson's disease is unique, and dietary changes affect different people to varying degrees. While eliminating dairy has been transformative for me and for many others I have spoken with, you might find that it makes a modest difference or a dramatic difference or somewhere in between. The only way to know how it will affect your specific symptoms is to try it consistently for at least 12 weeks. Also remember that dietary changes work best as part of a comprehensive approach to managing Parkinson's disease. Continue taking your medications as prescribed, stay physically active, prioritize good sleep, manage stress, and maintain social connections. Diet is a powerful tool, but it is one tool among many. Finally, be compassionate with yourself. If you slip up and accidentally consume dairy, or if you consciously choose to have it on a special occasion, do not beat yourself up or think you have ruined everything. Just get back on track with your next meal. Progress is more important than perfection. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope this information about dairy and Parkinson's disease has given you a new perspective and a concrete action you can take to potentially improve your symptoms. If this video was helpful, please share it with others who might benefit. Knowledge is one of the most powerful tools we have for managing this disease. Now I want to dive deeper into some specific mechanisms by which dairy accelerates Parkinson's progression, because understanding the science helps you stay motivated when eliminating dairy feels challenging. One mechanism that deserves more attention is how dairy affects something called uric acid levels in your body. Uric acid is typically thought of as something negative associated with gout, but research has shown that uric acid actually has neuroprotective effects in the brain. It acts as an antioxidant, helping to neutralize free radicals that damage dopamine neurons. Several studies have found that people with higher uric acid levels have a lower risk of developing Parkinson's disease, and those who already have Parkinson's progress more slowly if their uric acid levels are higher. Here is where dairy comes in. Consuming dairy products lowers uric acid levels in your body. The exact mechanism is not completely understood, but it appears to involve how dairy proteins affect purine metabolism and kidney function. So by regularly consuming dairy, you are actually reducing your body's natural neuroprotective mechanisms. You are lowering the very compound that helps protect your dopamine neurons from damage. This is one reason why the association between dairy and Parkinson's is so strong, and why eliminating dairy can lead to such significant improvements in symptom progression. Another important mechanism involves something called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These are harmful compounds that form when proteins or fats combine with sugars. Dairy products, especially when heated or processed, are high in AGEs. When you consume foods high in AGEs, they promote inflammation and oxidative stress throughout your body, including in your brain. They damage blood vessels, which affects blood flow to the brain. They interfere with cellular repair mechanisms, and they contribute to the accumulation of abnormal proteins in neurons. In Parkinson's disease, there is already an accumulation of abnormal proteins called alpha-synuclein in dopamine neurons. Anything that increases protein damage and accumulation accelerates disease progression. By eliminating dairy, especially processed dairy products like cheese, which is very high in AGEs, you reduce this source of oxidative stress and protein damage. I also want to talk about the impact of dairy on mitochondrial function, because this is crucial for understanding why dairy affects energy levels in Parkinson's disease. Mitochondria are the energy-producing factories inside every cell. Dopamine neurons have especially high energy demands because they have long branching connections and are constantly firing signals. In Parkinson's disease, mitochondrial function is already impaired. This is one reason why fatigue is such a prominent symptom. Dairy consumption has been shown to negatively affect mitochondrial function through several mechanisms. The pesticide residues in conventional dairy directly damage mitochondria. The inflammatory response triggered by casein increases oxidative stress, which damages mitochondria, and the hormones in dairy may interfere with cellular energy production. When you eliminate dairy, you remove these sources of mitochondrial damage, allowing your cells to produce energy more efficiently. This is why many people report significant improvements in energy levels within a few weeks of going dairy-free. It is not just a placebo effect. It is your cells actually functioning better at a fundamental level. Let me share more practical information about navigating specific situations that people often find challenging when eliminating dairy. Breakfast is often the hardest meal because so many traditional breakfast foods contain dairy, cereal with milk, yogurt with granola, buttered toast, cheese omelets, pancakes, waffles, the list goes on. Here are some delicious dairy-free breakfast options that have become staples for me. Steel-cut oatmeal cooked with almond milk and topped with berries, walnuts, and a drizzle of almond butter. Smoothies made with plant-based milk, spinach, frozen berries, banana and flaxseed. Avocado toast on whole grain bread with tomatoes and everything bagel seasoning. Scrambled eggs cooked in olive oil with sautéed vegetables. Chia pudding made with coconut milk and topped with fresh fruit. Buckwheat pancakes made with almond milk, served with pure maple syrup and berries. These breakfasts are not only dairy-free, but they are also packed with nutrients that support brain health. Once you have a few go-to-breakfast options that you enjoy, the transition becomes much easier. Dining out is another situation that requires some strategy. Restaurants love to use butter and cheese because they add flavor and richness to food, but most restaurants are willing to accommodate dairy-free requests if you ask. Here are my strategies for eating out successfully. I look at the menu online before going to the restaurant so I can identify options and plan my questions. When ordering, I clearly state that I cannot have any dairy due to a medical condition. Restaurants tend to take medical restrictions more seriously than preferences. I ask specific questions like, is this cooked in butter? Does this sauce contain cream? Is there cheese in this dish? I request modifications without hesitation, asking for olive oil instead of butter. Sauce on the side. No cheese, please. I have learned which types of restaurants are easier for dairy-free eating. Asian restaurants, especially Thai, Vietnamese, and Japanese, tend to use less dairy. Mediterranean and Middle Eastern restaurants have many naturally dairy-free options. Mexican restaurants can work if you avoid cheese and sour cream. Steakhouses can be good if you get grilled meat and vegetables cooked in oil instead of butter. I always carry a small container of my own salad dressing, because most restaurant dressings contain dairy or are made with inflammatory oils. Social situations can be emotionally challenging because food is such a central part of gatherings and celebrations. People often feel offended if you do not eat what they have prepared. They might pressure you to make an exception just this once. They might not understand why you are being so strict about avoiding dairy. Here is how I handle these situations. I eat before attending events so I am not hungry and tempted. I bring a dish to share that I know I can eat, ensuring there is at least one safe option. I am direct but not preachy about my dietary restrictions, simply saying, I cannot have dairy because it significantly worsens my Parkinson's symptoms. Most people are understanding when they realize it is truly a medical issue, not a lifestyle choice. I have learned to be okay with being different, with eating differently from everyone else. With bringing my own food to events, my health and symptom control are more important than social conformity. For very close friends and family, I have taken the time to educate them about why dairy is so problematic for Parkinson's. They have become supportive and even accommodating, making dairy-free options when I visit, or choosing restaurants with good dairy-free choices. Let me address the emotional and psychological aspects of eliminating dairy, because these are often overlooked but are crucial to long-term success. Many of us have deep emotional connections to certain foods. Cheese might remind you of family dinners. Ice cream might be associated with happy childhood memories. Giving up these foods can feel like losing part of your identity or your past. It is important to acknowledge these feelings rather than dismiss them. Yes, this is just food, but food is also deeply tied to culture, family, comfort, and identity. Allow yourself to grieve the loss of these foods. It is okay to feel sad or frustrated about having to give them up. At the same time, Start building new positive associations with your dairy-free foods. Create new traditions and comfort foods that happen to be dairy-free. Celebrate the improvements in your symptoms as a powerful motivation. Remind yourself that you are choosing health and better function over temporary taste pleasure. Over time, your taste preferences actually change. Foods you once craved become less appealing, and you genuinely start preferring how you feel without dairy. I want to share some information about what to expect during the transition period when you first eliminate dairy, because understanding what is normal can help you stay committed. Some people experience what is called a detox period during the first week or two after eliminating dairy. You might have increased cravings, headaches, digestive changes, mood swings, or even a temporary worsening of symptoms. This happens because your body is adjusting to the absence of compounds it had become accustomed to. Casein in particular has been shown to have opioid-like effects on the brain, which is why cheese can be so addictive. When you suddenly remove it, your body goes through a mini withdrawal. This detox period is temporary and usually passes within 1 to 2 weeks. If you can push through this initial challenging phase, the benefits on the other side are well worth it. After the detox period, most people start noticing positive changes. Better digestion is often the first improvement. Less bloating, more regular bowel movements, reduced inflammation in the gut. Then energy levels start to improve, usually around week 3 to 4. Tremors and other motor symptoms typically take longer to show improvement, usually 6 to 8 weeks. This is because you are reducing chronic inflammation and supporting cellular repair, processes that take time. It is important to give this experiment a full 12 weeks before deciding whether it is working for you. Many people give up after 2 or 3 weeks, saying they do not notice any difference. But the most significant improvements often come after the 2-month mark. Let me talk about children and young adults with Parkinson's disease, because their needs and challenges with dietary changes can be different. Young-onset Parkinson's, which affects people under 50, presents unique challenges. These individuals are often still working, raising families, and trying to maintain active social lives. They may face more pressure to eat conventionally, more social situations involving food, and less patience with dietary restrictions. However, young people also often see more dramatic benefits from dietary changes because their bodies are generally more responsive and their disease is at an earlier stage. If you are a younger person with Parkinson's, I encourage you to take dairy elimination seriously. Even though it might feel socially isolating at times, the benefits to your symptom control and potentially your disease progression are significant. For parents of children with Parkinson's, which is rare but does occur, eliminating dairy should be done under medical supervision to ensure the child still gets adequate nutrition for growth and development. Work closely with a pediatric neurologist and a registered dietitian who understands Parkinson's disease. I also want to address the question of whether eliminating dairy can prevent Parkinson's disease in people who do not yet have it, but may be at risk. If you have a family history of Parkinson's, or have been told you have some early signs of the disease, should you eliminate dairy now as a preventive measure? While I cannot give you a definitive answer because the research is still evolving, the evidence does suggest that people who consume less dairy have a lower risk of developing Parkinson's. The studies I mentioned earlier showed that higher dairy intake was associated with increased Parkinson's risk. This suggests that reducing or eliminating dairy might be protective. However, we cannot say for certain that eliminating dairy will prevent Parkinson's because the disease has multiple causes, including genetic factors, environmental exposures, and other variables we do not fully understand. What I can say is that eliminating dairy has many other health benefits: reduced inflammation, better gut health, elimination of pesticide residues. So even if it does not definitively prevent Parkinson's, it is still likely beneficial for overall brain health. If you are at risk for Parkinson's, I would recommend discussing dairy elimination with your doctor as part of a comprehensive prevention strategy that also includes exercise, stress management, avoiding environmental toxins, and eating a brain-healthy diet rich in omega-3s, antioxidants, and vegetables. Now let me give you some specific brand recommendations and shopping tips, because practical information makes implementation easier. For plant-based milk, my favorites are California Farms, unsweetened almond milk, which has a clean taste and creamy texture, Oatly oat milk, which is great in coffee, and so, delicious unsweetened coconut milk, which works well in smoothies. Avoid plant milks with added sugars or long lists of additives. Stick to simple ingredients. For yogurt, I like Coco June Pure Coconut Yogurt, which has live cultures and a tangy flavor similar to dairy yogurt. Kite Hill Almond Milk Yogurt, And Culina plain coconut yogurt. Add your own fruit, rather than buying pre-sweetened varieties. For cheese, there are many nut-based options. Miyoko's makes excellent cashew-based cheeses. Kite Hill has good cream cheese and ricotta alternatives. Violife makes shreds and slices that melt reasonably well. I will be honest, vegan cheese does not taste exactly like dairy cheese, but many brands are quite good and satisfying once you adjust your expectations. For butter, Earth Balance and Miyoko's both make good plant-based butter alternatives, or simply use olive oil or avocado oil instead. For ice cream, the options have exploded in recent years. So Delicious makes dozens of flavors from coconut milk. Ben & Jerry's has several non-dairy options. Nadamu is another good brand. These taste remarkably close to dairy ice cream. For Coffee Creamer Nut Pods and Califia Farms, both make unsweetened creamers that work well in coffee. When shopping, read every label carefully. Even products labeled non-dairy sometimes contain casein or other milk derivatives. Look for products labeled vegan, which guarantees they are completely dairy-free. Let me address one more important consideration, which is the cost of dairy alternatives. Some people look at the price of almond milk or vegan cheese and think they cannot afford to eat dairy-free. It is true that some specialty dairy-free products are expensive, but eating dairy-free does not have to break your budget. Here are strategies for keeping costs manageable. Buy store-brand plant milks, which are usually much cheaper than name brands. Make your own plant milk at home, which is very inexpensive. 1 cup of almonds makes about 4 cups of almond milk. Skip the specialty vegan cheeses and focus on whole foods instead. You do not need cheese substitutes to eat dairy-free. Use healthy whole food fats like avocado, nuts, seeds, and olive oil instead of expensive butter alternatives. Buy frozen fruits and vegetables, which are just as nutritious as fresh and often much cheaper. Cook at home instead of eating out or buying prepared foods. This is where the real savings come in. Focus on inexpensive protein sources like beans, lentils, eggs, and canned fish instead of expensive specialty products. Prioritize where you spend your money. Maybe you buy organic produce but skip the pricey vegan cheese. When I calculated my grocery costs after going dairy-free, I found that I was actually spending less overall because I was cooking at home more and avoiding expensive processed foods. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next video where we will discuss the supplements that have the strongest scientific evidence for slowing Parkinson's progression.